There's a nice little research project for some communications master's student who might be interested in the question of how Australians respond to a decline to be interviewed or was not available for comment in investigative media reports. Now, media trainers and PR types are prone to speculate that it implies the organisation or the person has something to hide, that it's a signal of evasion or negativity. But you know, they don't really know. I mean, maybe listeners are so sceptical of some media outlets these days that they forgive people for not offering themselves up to be absolutely hammered. But personally, I'm always left with a negative impression of organisations that decline to give their side of the story. Professionally, I encourage all of my clients to look at interview requests as an opportunity to tell their side of a yarn. For me, it's quite hard to ignore the correlation between negativity and evasiveness on the one hand, as opposed to positivity and openness on the other. Richard Branson has built a remarkable global profile by being clever and open with the media. Not everyone needs to do stunts with models and dress up in crazy outfits, but he does frame a pretty interesting comparison to some of the more media-shy Australian business figures. The considered decision of people like Nathan Tinkler and Gina Reinhardt to avoid the media and consistently decline media interviews clearly influences our perception of them. It's only via the media that we can shape any kind of perception of them at all. Let's say you're driving home from work on a normal Monday, you're listening to the radio. When James Hardie is criticised for inadequate provisions in the compensation fund for asbestos victims, and no one was available to explain the challenges associated with maintaining such a fund.
Nobody from James Hardie would speak with PM about today's announcement. The fund, which is a separate legal entity, also turned down requests for interviews.
Well, what do you make of that? So then you have dinner and you settle in front of Four Corners with a cup of tea. James Packer's Crown is investigated in a media expose on the regulation of Australian casinos, and no one from Crown is available to comment.
Crown Resorts declined to be interviewed for this program. They've provided statements in response to questions which can be viewed on our website.
So what impression does that leave on you? I know the lawyers and the regulatory people are always banging on about the risks of doing interviews that you can't control with journalists who have somehow made up their mind. The reality is that talented spokespeople can always exert a level of control, and good journalists are trained not to have made up their mind. So consider the risks of not doing the interview. That is, the risk of being portrayed negatively, the risk of people making up their mind about you and your business based on your reluctance to tell your side of the story. Also consider the impact you've had on the journalist's initial intention to portray you fairly. You've made their job so much harder. If you've seen Jude Law and Catherine Zeta-Jones in the movie Side Effects, you will know that the main dramatic device used in that film to portray the drug company as having done the wrong thing was to show them refusing to be interviewed on TV. Of course, there are times when it does make sense to decline an interview. If you do not have a talented spokesperson who can deal with the situation with which you are faced, or indeed where you've been given too little notice to confirm the actual context for the story, or indeed the interest of the journalist. And yes, of course, there are always risks associated with doing interviews, no matter what the context. But you know what? There are sometimes even bigger risks associated with not doing them, and that is certainly worth reflecting on the next time you are faced with that dilemma.